Robert Fulghum was a minister, and you may remember his name because he became quite famous for some of the things he wrote. Really, the first thing that he wrote that received cultural attention was a little essay entitled, "Everything I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten." You remember that essay? And he talked about the simple lessons we learn in the sandbox, and it caught fire and people read it, and he wrote more essays and he published books, and in one of his books he talks about something that took place on an autumn afternoon. He was sitting up, second story of his house, in his writer's room. The light was on, the window was open, he was sitting at his desk trying to think deep thoughts and put something down on paper, because now he was a writer and he had to write. And as he was sitting at his desk thinking deep thoughts, there was a game of hide and seek going on outside in his backyard. He said it was late fall. He'd raked the leaves up into a big pile in his backyard, and the kids were playing hide and seek in 3 or 4 yards surrounding his yard, and home base was his driveway, because he had a light on over the top of his garage, and so the kids could gather in his driveway. That was home base, and then off they'd run to hide. And he said, so he got up from his desk and just watched the game unfold, and remembered back to games of hide and seek that he'd been a part of. You hide, and you seek, and in the end, you're found. And he said there were always people, kids in the neighborhood, who hid too good, and they were impossible to find. You couldn't find them. And he said that's frustrating, because it's half the fun is finding someone, half the fun is the discovery. And so as he watched this game happen out in his backyard, he was listening to the kids, and he saw one of them climb into the pile of leaves that was in his yard and hide there. And it was astonishing, he said, that the other kids were all looking for him, and they kind of kicked around the edge of the pile of leaves and shouted at the pile of leaves. The kid was in there. Fulghum said, I saw him hide in there. But they didn't find him, and they were looking around, and then they were talking about him, and where could he be? And let's just guard home base so that we can tag him if he's trying to run home. And Fulghum said he took it as long as he could, and then he leaned out the window and shouted as loud as he could, "Get found, kid!" And he said he saw the leaves rustle, and the kid sat up in the leaves to the astonishment of his friends who were standing around. He said, Fulghum wrote, he said, if I had to guess, I think he probably peed his pants a little, but at the sound of the shout from the upstairs window. But then the joy and the embrace and the fun that came after he came out of the leaves and was found, and his friends had been standing there the whole time right near him, and they didn't see him, and they didn't guess that he would be in there, because it seemed that if he was, they would have heard him. And Fulghum went on to write about people that he knew in life who hid too good. And they never really came out of hiding. Never let you really know who they truly are. And that way of living, he said, has painful consequences. Today in our gospel lesson, we share an experience of someone who finally came out of hiding. Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is coming into town, coming into Jericho, and he just wants to be there to see him. Doesn't want to get involved, doesn't want to become a follower, just wants to see him. But that's what God does. You see, that's God's trick. He just gets us a little bit interested. And as we draw near to see, Jesus sees us. And that's what happened to Zacchaeus. Jesus saw him and called him down, and instead of reprimanding Zacchaeus for having cheated people, he accepts him and he celebrates him. And he sets him free, because Zacchaeus says, I'm changed, that the burden of my past that I have been carrying all these years, I'm letting it go. If I've defrauded anyone, I give it back fourfold, and I give half of all that I have to the poor. And Jesus says, salvation has come to this house because Zacchaeus has found his faith as a child of Abraham. And Jesus leads Zacchaeus home. That's what happens. Zacchaeus goes to see, and everything unfolds from there. And Luke wants us to know that's how it works. We take one step, and then God draws us in. If we come out of hiding just a little bit, God is going to finish the job and bring us to the fullness of the experience of God, where our relationships are changed. Our relationship with God is changed. Our relationship with other people is changed. Our own self-understanding is changed. That's what happened to Zacchaeus. And that's how it has been from the very beginning of Jesus coming into the world. Did you hear in the story of Zacchaeus that he makes haste to be in the presence of Jesus? And that word in Luke's gospel only appears one other place, where these people who are just kind of hanging out by themselves and are considered unworthy of life in community say, let's go see. You remember those people? They're the shepherds. The shepherds on Christmas Eve night. Let's go see this thing that the Lord has made known to us. And the shepherds make haste and they go and see the baby Jesus in the manger and Mary and Joseph. And they leave as transformed people. They have been seen and they've been accepted and celebrated and set free, and they go home rejoicing and praising God and giving thanks to God for what they had experienced. Same thing happens to Zacchaeus. He comes out of hiding. And he experiences not condemnation, but acceptance. Jesus doesn't come to condemn anyone. God sent his Son into the world not to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. And so many people are afraid that if I open my heart to God or open my heart to anyone else, I'm going to be judged, I'm going to be condemned. And Jesus doesn't do that. He accepts Zacchaeus and he accepts us. And he sets us free to live as children of God, free from the burdens of the past that we carry. Can you imagine the burdens that Zacchaeus carried every day as the chief tax collector in Jericho? Jericho was an oasis town, a few miles away from Jerusalem in the middle of a desert. And Jericho had water, and Jericho had trees, and Jericho had fruits and vegetables. And in the middle of this oasis was Zacchaeus, who was the chief tax collector who was taking everyone's money. And everyone hated him for it. And suddenly Jesus sees him and accepts him and sets him free from that burden. Anyone I've defrauded, I pay them back fourfold. He's changed. His life is changed. And half of all my possessions I give to the poor. It's interesting that the name Zacchaeus means the righteous one or the innocent one. And until Jesus shows up and Zacchaeus goes out to see him, just to kind of stay hidden, but just to see him, he is anything but the righteous one or the innocent one. And what Jesus does in seeing him and accepting him and setting him free and leading him home is to allow Zacchaeus to become Zacchaeus, to become the righteous one, meaning that his relationships are now made right. Righteous doesn't mean you never do anything wrong ever again. Righteous means that you are now living in right relationship. You are living in the forgiveness and mercy of God. You are living in your recognition of your care for others. You are living in the truth of who you really are, and find out the truth of who you really are. And the very heart of you is made right. It's a powerful thing to come out of hiding. God has been calling to human hearts from the very dawn of creation. In the Garden of Eden, after Adam and Eve have the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the first thing they do is they run and hide. And God comes walking in the garden in the cool of the evening. And he calls out, "Where are you?" It's an invitation to come out of hiding. And Zacchaeus comes out of hiding, and his life is changed. And that's an invitation to us to come out of hiding and to experience the embrace and the acceptance and the mercy and the forgiveness and the love and the life-changing power of God in our hearts. We can be Zacchaeus. If all we want to do is just take a closer look, just catch a glimpse of who God really is, and lean, or even be inclined to lean in that direction, God draws us out, and suddenly God's life is happening in the midst of our lives. It's crazy. We go to see and we are seen, and that changes everything. I remember someone I knew in the life of the church who quit his job as an engineer so that he could go out into the world as a missionary. And he went as a missionary and helped people build things. He traveled all over the world, went to Africa, went to the Middle East, went to the Far East. He had a remarkable way of going into a community and belonging and entering in without judgment. And he would go in with a group of people and say, "We're here to help." And I remember he led a retreat where he was talking about giving your life to God in service. And he said, "This is what I've learned after years of traveling around the world and giving my life to God. We go to help, and we're the ones who are helped. We go to teach, and we're the ones who are taught. We go to bless, and we're the ones who are blessed." But isn't that just like our God? And it is. We come just to see, just to catch a glimpse. But here we are, and we're seen, and God sees us, and God accepts us, and God sets us free, and God draws us home. It's an amazing thing that God does, and God draws us out of hiding. And what a beautiful celebration when we come out of hiding, and we're here on All Saints Sunday to celebrate that the day will come when everyone will come out of hiding, when we will leave this world and will stand before the Lord as the children of God that we are, and God will accept us and set us free and lead us home. That day will come for all of us. And Zacchaeus says, "Let it come now. Let it come today. Live the life of someone who's come out of hiding, and live it now." Because to live in hiding simply destroys us from the inside out. We wish and pray that everyone would come out of hiding and open their hearts to God, but this is Jericho. That's where Jesus called to Zacchaeus, in Jericho. And you know the story of Jericho, right? We know Joshua fit the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. And do you know why Joshua fit the battle of Jericho? And it says in just one line, that when Joshua and the Hebrew people came into the promised land and went to the city of Jericho closed up its walls and its gates, and they let no one in and they let no one out. They went into hiding. They had heard about what God had done with the Egyptians and how God had led his children through the sea and how God had led them through the wilderness. And at Jericho, they said, we're closing up our doors. We're not letting you in, and no one is coming out. They went into hiding because they didn't want to have to deal with what it was that maybe God could do. And maybe they didn't believe that whatever it was that God could do would be good for them. But God is a God who calls us out of hiding and accepts us and sets us free and leads us home. And there are still people who live with their walls closed up and the gates closed, and they don't let anyone in, and they never really come out. Warren Black is a Methodist minister from down in Mississippi, son of a Methodist minister from down in Mississippi, and really lived a full and impactful ministry, but nothing particularly marvelous in his ministry except one thing. He did one thing that thousands of people wanted to do, but they never did. They couldn't do. But he did it. There was a writer for about 30 years in the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s who wrote books on the Christian faith and had a tremendous following in the life of the church, particularly among pastors and in seminaries. Frederick Buechner is his name. He wrote and he settled in Vermont, on a farm in Vermont, and he just wanted to be left alone. His kids were grown, and people said, don't go to the farmhouse. He will not see anyone that he doesn't already know. And that was true. He lived in his farmhouse. He wrote occasionally. He would go out and give a sermon or a dedication or a commencement address. But most of the time, he just stayed to himself at home and wrote. And Warren Black wrote him a letter and said, I want to come and see you. And this is what I want to talk about. We share some common history, Warren Black said, that nobody talks about. And I would love to have a chance to talk about it with you. A couple of weeks later, Warren Black got a letter from Frederick Buechner that said, if you come up in the summer, we'll have more time to sit and chat. And so Warren Black got in his car in July and drove from Mississippi to Vermont. Sent Buechner a letter, said, I'm coming, this is when I'll be there. Showed up that very day, knocked on the door, Buechner was there, said, if you prefer tea, I have that. If you have coffee, I have that. If you need iced tea, I have that. Let's sit down and chat. And they did. And they talked about their lives, talked about their faith, and talked about their families. The common history they shared, they talked about that too. And Warren Black said, you know, it's something that nobody talks about, and nobody really lets you talk about it. And the common history that they shared was they each had someone in their family who took their own life. Buechner's father took his own life in an early November morning when he got up and went out to the garage and closed the garage door and started the car, let it run. And Buechner, as a boy, was awakened by the sound of the firemen breaking into the garage and dragging his father out of the car and into the driveway, trying to resuscitate him. Warren Black grew up with a sister who was a wonderful person. He loved her, but he said he was never quite able to reach her. He wrote about the experience that he shared with Buechner, and in writing, he wrote about his sister. He said, Fred and I talked, he about his father, I about my sister. And the beautiful thing that we shared is we loved them and we didn't blame them. I think of my sister. I love her. She was intelligent and attractive, the homecoming queen in high school, an accomplished pianist, someone who could light up a room. She was a medical social worker at a children's hospital in Denver. How much pain and loss she lived through, we'll never know. She didn't share it, but I can just imagine the pain she carried. I cannot know, nor can anyone, the level of pain she must have felt. I wish she would have let us know. She tried, and we didn't have the eyes to see. And for that, I continue to pray for forgiveness. I think of all the times I could have been kinder and more patient and been the older brother she needed. I wish I could have just found a way to ask and listen. But I love her and I miss her. And one day, Warren Black said, my sister and I will be together again. And it's the truth. We will be together again in the house of God, where Jesus will see us and accept us and set us free and lead us home. And on that day, all of God's children will have come out of hiding, and they will be home at last. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.